Hey everybody, this is Munson Steed, and we are on Sister Superpowers, where we introduce you to sisters who are creating safe spaces with benefits for you and I. I am so proud to be here. HU, I can holler it out real loud for those who don't know. Chanelle Hardy, Esquire, that means she qualified, you guys. Shout outs to you. How are you, sister?
I'm doing great. And thank you for recognizing the number one historically black college and university in the United States.
Hey, and you just won the MEAC. So, for those that don't know, great basketball team moving over there. So, for you, why go to college at all? And what would you say to young sisters about the very value proposition of just having an education of some sort?
Yeah, well, I have to say, I think I remember a Chris Rock joke when he was less controversial, perhaps, where he talked about the first drug dealer was selling books. I'm always fascinated in things folks don't want me to do. I think all the great knowledge, or a lot of it, is hidden in books. And so I've always actually really loved education for its own sake. But college was an opportunity to also add those credentials, and of course law school. And I still think it's clear our country has a lack of creativity when it comes to Black talent. So the more that you can do to show people that you're in fact qualified, the better.
So, let's talk about titles and professional currency. Professional currency is one of those things that you develop. Obviously, you have it now that you have the JD. It's part of that currency. Why get a legal degree if you're a young person, and why do we need it for sisters? Why do we need it? Where is it needed most? And so that people may not know what Black women are doing and needed as it relates even in the legal field.
Yeah, and I'll say I am a what they would call a non-traditional lawyer, and that I don't practice law. I do public policy, but I went to law school in one because my daddy told me to, but also because I majored in English and music. Told you I just loved education for its own sake. So I knew I was probably going to need more credentials at some point. I actually taught in fifth grade here in DC for 2 years with Teach for America. I did a free breakfast, free lunch school. So, I was dealing with some kids who were dealing with some real life challenges, but also were just incredibly brilliant. They really inspired me, and I wanted to make their lives and their families' lives better. That was part of why I went to law school. What I found that I had when I graduated from law school was not just, a more efficient way of thinking, reading, writing, talking, but a credential that pretty much said to folks, oh, she's smart. Because, unfortunately, being in civil rights, we know that the statistics are that generally white folks believe they're smarter than a Black person, regardless of credentials. So, you might as well help yourself. And I found when I went to Capitol Hill, people would come in and start lobbying me. And then I would give them my business card and it said counsel. They'd be like, can I start over again? And they'd give me the more thoughtful lobbying because they were like, oh, she's smart, which is a shame because we know you don't need the credentials to prove that you're smart, but it sure does help.
So when you think about being head of something, obviously a huge corporation like Google, civil rights, what should a young sister now who is at Howard thinking about life know that you do each and every day to preserve her rights moving forward before she stands in your shoes?
Yeah, it's been an honor to be in this role. There are kind of two parts of the work I think about. One is the program. So as we all recall in 2020, when corporate America kind of got a conscience about racial equity, that was a moment where we really thought about how do we build a lasting infrastructure to make sure that what we're doing in terms of civil and human rights is not based on a crisis of the moment. And so we launched our Human Rights Executive Council. We explicitly gave our board oversight over civil and human rights. And they oversee the program that I run, which is really ensuring that our company understands the implications of civil rights on our products, tools, and policies, and is supporting that. So we actually just completed a civil rights audit to really look across the company and see what we need to do better. It was a really great exercise. And then, of course, I get to work with a lot of our mutual friends, Bunsen, because I manage our stakeholder relationships with all of the national civil and human rights organizations in the country.
So when you say your title now, what do you think about it?
I think it means there's plenty to do every day. You'll never run out of important work. It's exciting to me because obviously companies like mine impact all of our lives every day. And so everything that I get right, my team gets right, has the potential to have a really a broad impact. I mean, it's going to impact everybody who uses Google, and that's most folks. So that's always exciting. And then just to be able to think about, as I work with our partner organizations, how do we ensure that our civil rights community, leadership, movement really understands what's going on with tech and can be at the table to protect us? And also to make sure that we can take advantage of the opportunity, because there's so much going on in tech, as you know, and we don't want to be, at the back of the line in terms of being able to access the job opportunities, the economic opportunities, or even just thinking about how we use it to do our work better. So there's just kind of an endless amount of opportunity. As much as you can think of, there's the work to do.
Well, but how would you describe your superpowers? Because it's you walk in the room, you got to have some. You got to be ready. There's microaggression in a workplace. There are lots of those. What are your superpowers?
I think my superpowers are empathy, tenacity, and creativity. Empathy, because I think, all the way back to reading W.E.B. Du Bois and, the Souls of Black Folk, and understanding that we have the ability to see, to walk in double consciousness. So I think I'm grateful that I'm able to actually understand the suffering, the challenges, the hope that other people have, whether they're Black or not. And I think being Black in America really uniquely positions you to have that insight. Tenacity, obviously growing up as a Black girl, but then being in the civil rights movement, folks have been fighting the same battles for generation after generation. It looks a little different, but it's the same battle. So I don't really get tired of the fight, and folks will sometimes say, don't you get tired doing this every day? Isn't it discouraging when you see another shooting? And of course it is, but it's also like that's not going to stop me from getting up and fighting again. And then creativity, like I said before, if you can't solve a problem one way, let's try another. That's something that's also part of our history. We can make something out of nothing. So I think those are my superpowers.
I love that. So can you share with some, and I'm just saying a sister who really is trying to figure out why tenacity is something that she needs to hold on to and not let someone take her power away?
Yeah, I just think about Toni Morrison talking about the goal of racism is to tire you out so you won't be creative. And if you allow yourself to be tired out by the battles that you have to fight every day, you'll lose before you even get in the game. And there's so much that we have achieved as a community. I mean, I love the National Museum of African American History and Culture, and the way, as you kind of go around the ramps, you see, okay, tried to get us, overcame, tried to get us, overcame, and that's our history. And so if you don't overcome, then you don't get to see those next moments like the Black president or the National Museum of African American History and Culture on the National Mall, or being able to leverage tech to help identify where we can target resources to replace lead pipes and get good water. I mean, there's just kind of an endless amount of things that we can do to make the world better and make life better for our people if we don't get tired.
I love that. And I love the fact that you had a bullet of intelligence from a huge genius, obviously a sister in her own right. What other sisters do you share great quotes from that really inspire you, that you would share with anybody watching the Sister Superpowers interview right now that you utilize to stay inspired? Because that inspired me.
Yeah, I wouldn't be a self-respecting Black woman if I didn't say my mama. My mother raised 6 children. All of us graduated from college, and all are trying to make the world a better place. And, she would tell us a quote that she didn't come up with, to whom much is given, much is required. She was like, you never went hungry. So you got to think about all those children who have. Another is my mentor. You probably know her, Dr. Barbara Williams Skinner, the first Black woman to be executive director of the Congressional Black Caucus. She is one of the people who really talked to me about the legacy of resilience in our community, and that you just can't get tired. She'll be 80 years old this year. She doesn't get tired. I get tired before she does. And then probably the last one I would say is Octavia Butler. She's just my favorite author. And I think she encourages us to, she leverages storytelling to get us to think about complex topics like racism in a way that I think is really fresh and challenging. And so I find her very inspiring as well.
So I'm glad you talked about Octavia. That obviously is in the creativity, but Afrofuturism is a thing now. When we think
Yes.
about the lens of Google and the lens of AI and the lens of bias in that, what book would Octavia Butler, if you were her editor now, what book would you have her writing for Black women on a Black world?
That's a great question. I mean, I think one thing that she didn't do was write about, another planet, and I do think that actually a white author, I still would love to understand what made him think about this, but Ray Bradbury wrote a short story years ago about a southern Black town where there was the last rocket ship going to Mars, and all the Black people decided they were going to go, and they all left. Despite whatever obstacle. And Octavia Butler's books are so, what I love about sci-fi is that they allow us to imagine a future where it's not all boundaried by racism and our experiences as Black people in this country, in this world. But I think when you're imagining what's possible, putting it on a whole different planet is probably worthwhile. And frankly, aren't we all thinking about that when we look at what we're doing to this planet? So
When you think about that and you're giving a speech back at Howard Law, or you were speaking at a Spelman, what would be the challenges that you would ask them to face? So what would be the title of the book, and what would be the 3 challenges that you would want them to understand that they would face and overcome?
So Munson, I will say, unlike you as a lawyer, my talent is not coming up with good names for something. So I'll have to think about what the really exciting title of the book would be, but the subtitle would be Hope. I think the next generation really has to define for themselves what it means to have hope in the ongoing struggle for justice. Because I was part of the civil rights movement, still am, I started to do these marches, of course. And sometimes I'd be just completely overcome watching like elders, people in wheelchairs. And I'm like, you fought for this when you were a young man, a young woman, and now you're back here fighting for the same thing. And it is so upsetting, but also inspiring that they're like, I did do that, but I'm not tired. I'm back again, even if I have to have a little bit of help to get to the end of this march. And I think as the oldest of 6 kids, I look at some of my younger siblings and I know they're discouraged. They have access to so much more knowledge at their fingertips. And so they think they've got everything figured out, and they think it's a bad story. And if our enslaved ancestors could have hope, and our ancestors who were singing "We Shall Overcome" with no reason to believe that, no evidence for that, then surely we can have hope today. And so I want to hear what the next generation has to say about hope for our community.
I love that 100%, but I'm not going to let you get away with that. And uncovering that idea of hope, where
Yes.
do you find hope in not being an imposter? Like for
Yeah.
those who are in a room where you may be obviously in the minority, you have to push forward your agenda
Yeah.
and share with them insight. How do you not slip into that? I'm not quite black right now. I'm representing somebody else. Can you share the insight so that imposter doesn't grow over some sister and she doesn't know how to stay her authentic self her whole time and bring her professionalism and that fortitude that allows her to distinguish herself at that moment that she might question her sanity and her credentials?
Yeah, I mean, one thing that I will say was a big aha moment for me when I worked on Capitol Hill. We were lobbied by the Association of Truck Stop Restaurant Operators. And I had just never thought of having a representative for that type of, to me, niche business. But then you think about it, you're like, that's a big actual business. The takeaway for me with that, which was the same takeaway I had when I worked in the law library at Howard University School of Law, and people would come in to research because they wanted to represent themselves, which no one should ever do, is that there's a language for every professional field. Just like you speak a foreign language, there's a language to the law, there's a language to policy, there's a language to medicine, even though I don't know it. And your ability to speak it is part of your superpowers. So you always want to leverage the fact that you could speak that other language. But I also think about hearing one of my professors say, if you get a seat at the table, but then you say the same things that everyone else that was already there said, what was the benefit of having you in that room? So I'm always conscious that there are people much more deserving than me that should be in rooms that I have access to, and I'm not going to leave without their voice being heard. And so I'm always comfortable being speaking to my authentic truth. And the last thing I'll say on this to the young sisters out there is what has never ceased to amaze me is how, in addition to your credentials, your lived experience as a Black person gives you insight that other people lack. I would often be in a room where I was totally intimidated by the credentials of people around me. I'm the youngest person in the room. And then I say something that just seems like common sense, like, well, we're talking about unemployment insurance and about whether people are taking advantage of job training programs, but we're not having a conversation about how are they getting to the training site? Do they have broadband connections so they can study at home? Who's watching their kids? Who's paying for their food while they're taking off work to do job training? And people would be like, what a thoughtful insight. My goodness. You know, that makes me think of this and that and then the other thing. And I was just kind of like, this is surely common sense. And so I think so often we undervalue the knowledge that we bring into rooms just because of having to live in our country. Um, so we should be unafraid to be authentic and thoughtful, but know the language and be prepared.
Well, obviously, you're preparing the next generation over at Google, and we thank you for that. Want to thank you for a beautiful insight on being a sister with superpowers. Ladies and gentlemen, Chanelle Hardy, Esquire, we want to thank you for all that you continue to give and all that you continue to do for our community and for all the sisters with superpowers. Peace.
Thank you, Munson. So great to be here.